In 2011, Honolulu broke ground on what seemed like a straightforward project. Build an elevated rail line connecting West Oahu to downtown. 20 miles of track, 21 stations. A modern transit system for a city choking on traffic. The budget was $5.26 billion. The completion date was 2020. It's now 2024. The train still doesn't reach downtown. The cost has blown past $12 billion, and nobody can tell you when it'll actually be finished. So what happened? How does a rail project in America more than double in cost and miss its deadline by years? Because the Honolulu rail story isn't just about one city's transit disaster. It's about everything that goes wrong when American cities try to build big infrastructure. Let's start with the original plan. The Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation, known as HART, promised a 20-mile elevated rail line from Kapolei in West Oahu all the way to Ala Moana Center near Waikiki. The idea made sense. Honolulu has some of the worst traffic congestion in the United States. Commuters from the west side spend hours crawling into downtown. A train could change that. Voters approved a general excise tax increase in 2005 to fund it. The federal government committed over $1 billion. Construction started in 2011 with enormous confidence. This was going to transform Honolulu. The first hint of trouble came fast: archaeological discoveries. Honolulu isn't like building in the middle of a cornfield. The rail route cuts through areas rich with native Hawaiian cultural sites. Iwi, or ancestral remains, were discovered during excavation. Work stopped. Consultations began. The schedule slipped. Then came the engineering problems. Building an elevated rail line through an active city is stunningly complex. Utility relocations took longer than expected. Coordination with existing infrastructure became a nightmare. Every delay added costs. Not just the direct costs of more construction time, but the indirect costs of inflation, interest on borrowed money, and higher labor rates as the project dragged on. By 2014, just 3 years in, the cost estimate had already climbed to around $6.8 billion. The completion date pushed to 2021. Officials insisted these were just adjustments, normal for a project of this scale. But the real financial disaster was lurking in how the project was funded. Honolulu's rail relied heavily on that general excise tax increase. The problem? That tax was set to expire in 2022. The project wouldn't be done by then, not even close. So the state legislature extended the tax, then extended it again. Each extension became a political battle. Each battle added uncertainty. The Federal Transit Administration started getting nervous. They'd committed significant funding based on the original plan and budget. As costs spiraled, federal officials began asking hard questions. Would Honolulu actually finish this? Could they afford to? The FTA threatened to withhold funds if the city couldn't demonstrate a credible financial plan. In 2017, HART dropped a bombshell. The cost was now projected at $9.2 billion. The federal government demanded answers. The city scrambled. Leadership at HART turned over repeatedly. Executive directors came and went. Board members resigned. Each transition meant more delays as new leaders got up to speed. Then the scope started shrinking. The original plan had the train reaching Ala Moana Center, close to Waikiki where the tourists are. By 2018, facing financial reality, officials began discussing a shortened route. Maybe it stops at Middle Street, maybe Civic Center. The train might not reach its planned destination at all. Think about that. You're a West Oahu resident who voted for this tax increase. You were promised a train to Ala Moana. Now they're talking about stopping miles short. And you're still paying the tax. The costs kept climbing. By 2020, when the project was supposed to be finished, only 9 miles of track were operational, not open to the public, operational for testing. The cost estimate hit $10 billion. COVID hit, supply chain disruptions, labor shortages, material costs spiking. Everything that made construction difficult in 2020 made the Honolulu rail even more expensive. In 2021, the state legislature extended the general excise tax surcharge again, this time through 2030, because the money just kept running out. The city also started looking at other funding sources, borrowing, state contributions, anything to plug the gap. By 2023, the price tag exceeded $12 billion. Some estimates put the total cost, including financing, even higher. The opening date for the full system, if it ever reaches downtown, remains uncertain. Officials have discussed 2031, maybe later. Here's what makes this particularly painful. The first segment, from East Kapolei to Aloha Stadium, finally opened to passengers in 2023, 12 years after construction started. 9 miles. It works, people ride it, and by all accounts, it's a nice train. Smooth, clean, air-conditioned. But it doesn't go anywhere most riders need to go yet. It doesn't reach downtown. It doesn't reach the airport. It's a train to nowhere. The airport connection is especially galling. One of the major selling points was tourists taking the train from the airport to Waikiki. Reduce rental cars, ease congestion. But the train doesn't reach the airport yet. When it will remains unclear. So what went wrong? Ask 10 people and you'll get 10 answers. Some blame the archaeological delays. Some blame poor initial cost estimates. Some blame inflation and supply chain issues. Some blame political dysfunction and leadership turnover at heart. Some blame the funding structure that relied on a tax that kept expiring. The truth is probably all of it. This is what happens when optimism runs into reality. When a city wants modern infrastructure but underestimates every possible complication. When political pressure demands a low initial price tag to get voter approval, then reality asserts itself year after year. Other cities have rail projects that went over budget, but Honolulu's situation is extreme. Going from $5 billion to over $12 billion isn't a cost overrun. It's a complete breakdown of project planning and financial management. And the human cost matters. West Oahu residents, many of them working-class families, have paid a higher sales tax for nearly 20 years. They were promised a functioning train system by 2020. They're still waiting. The tax keeps getting extended. The finish line keeps moving. Meanwhile, Honolulu's ability to fund other infrastructure suffers. Money that could go to schools, parks, roads, or housing gets swallowed by the rail project. The political capital spent fighting over rail is capital not spent on other priorities. Could Honolulu still abandon the project? Technically, yes. But after spending over $12 billion, stopping now means that money bought 9 miles of train that doesn't connect to downtown. The sunk cost fallacy in action. You're in too deep to quit, even though finishing might cost billions more. So Honolulu keeps building. Slowly, expensively. The elevated guideway creeps toward downtown. Stations take shape. The tax keeps collecting revenue. And residents watch their rail project, once a symbol of progress and modernity, become a symbol of dysfunction. Will it ever be finished? Probably. Eventually. At some price. On some timeline. And when the train finally runs from West Oahu to downtown, maybe it'll be worth it. Maybe the traffic relief and connectivity will justify the cost. But here's what's certain. Honolulu's rail project went from $3 billion to $13 billion because American cities have forgotten how to build infrastructure at a reasonable cost. Because optimistic projections win voter approval but realistic ones might not. Because every stakeholder, legitimate concern, and complication adds time and money. And because once you start, stopping is politically impossible. Honolulu wanted a modern rail system. They're getting one. It's just costing 4 times more and taking twice as long as promised. And that's become the American way.